So today we have a guest, and his name is Rishi Bhargava. And Rishi was founder of a company called Demisto, and started about 4 years ago. And it was acquired earlier this year by Palo Alto Networks for about $550 million. So it's quite a fascinating journey from zero to $500 million in 4 years. And please join me in welcoming Rishi. So, I know Rishi for quite a while, so probably 24 years. We were actually in the same batch in undergrad, went to IT Delhi together in computer science, and after that, we came to the same city, came to Los Angeles in very friendly schools. I went to UCLA, he went to USC. And so certainly, observed, his journey as a tech operator, executive, and then an entrepreneur. So Rishi, I would love to, I think you had a number of different inflection points in your journey. Would love to, if you could share some of, especially in the context of Demisto, some of the more salient points, some of the more highlights, and that helped you think about creating Demisto.
Yeah. Thanks, Ankur. So I think, first of all, we'll keep the years 95 to 99 out of the conversation today, college years. The journey for me, I think, very, very exciting journey so far, right? So engineering by training, came to US for masters, as Ankur pointed out. But one thing that became very, very clear to me is I am as much as a problem solver as an engineer, and that's different a little bit, right? As an engineer, sometimes you're kind of, okay, here is what you're working on, and you go work on that. But what excites me was problem solving. And within the second or third year of my job, I turned to product management. And I think a lot of if you really, all the entrepreneurs in the audience here, from my perspective, a very good, strong product sense is important to build a strong company and being a problem solver. And I think a lot of the journey pieces are, you will run into a different problem. Go to market is a problem, sales is a problem. How do you approach it, and other pieces. So I started working as an engineer in pretty large company. It was a public company, ONI Systems. After masters, went to join a startup, SolidCore, which was, again, that was a very interesting experience. I think the other piece is ecosystem and connections that I heard Arka creating super important. So when I wanted to look for a job, I talked to an IIT Delhi senior, says, hey, I'm looking for something. And this was literally the first time I mentioned anybody that I'm looking to move. And he says, yeah, you should go talk to Rosen Sharma, who was another IIT Delhi senior working on a startup. And I met him, and literally in 4 hours from the talk started, I accepted the job offer. Why? Because you just like to work with people, right? So it was that was my first exposure to a startup. A lot of learnings, and I think for me, startups I call are a lifestyle. They're not a job. What that means is you have really a lot of ups and downs. SolidCore, I could argue, was an amazing experience that we built something totally new. Nobody else was doing that, but at the same time, it was not that big a success. Why? Because I don't think we did a fantastic job on what I call timing the market right. You build the thing that is needed by the market rather than you build something really cool and wait for the market to happen. So that was my biggest learning at SolidCore. Eventually it was decent outcome for the company, got acquired by McAfee. I spent a good 6 years at McAfee. And I think the other thing is at McAfee, a lot of people kind of says, oh, big corporates, boring, bureaucracy, red tape. I am a believer that large companies teach you a lot. I think one thing I learned was like running large businesses is an important learning for you to have if you ever want to build a large business. The way enterprises buy software, you can learn a lot from the enterprise sales teams. So I spent good 6 years there in product management, general management, did a little bit, launched a couple of brand new products, grew some products. And then came 2015 beginning where it says, okay, it's time to move on to the next thing. And that was the beginning of the Demisto journey where it was the team first. So to me, the other learning is always keep a very open mind on what you're trying to build. Goes back to the same thing, build something that the market needs. So it was like 4 of us, it says, we're going to build something together. So, okay, what should we build? We started talking to a few people. We had a hypothesis that this is what we want to build. And that hypothesis, when we took it to actual customers after we left the company, everybody like 30 to 40 different people says, no way. We have enough of those. You don't want to build another endpoint security solution. Do not want it. And then we turned the conversation very quickly to say, okay, what is your number one problem? What are you facing? What can we solve? Forget about what we are building, but what problem is that you want to solve? And that was very different approach. And within a matter of a month, we completely changed the idea. And we said, okay, if this is the number one problem based on our interviews, we're going to go solve that. So that's how Demisto got started. And between, I would say, March to July, we had completely changed the idea of Demisto between March in 2015 and July 2015. Then lots of learnings within Demisto.
Interesting. With Arka, a lot of the early stage companies, that exactly the stage they are often in, where they've starting this company out of India, they're going out of the US market, and then they're starting to talk to customers, trying to identify what is it that the customers really want. They have a hypothesis, maybe they've done some initial, they have an MVP, they're working with something, but how do you identify this is a real big need? So tell us about that. How did you, as you talked about the importance of having the right product sense, as you talk to a lot of these customers, they probably give you all kinds of feedback.
Yes.
What do you take, what you don't take, how do you use that to build the right product?
So I think there's a lot of learnings there, and I think let's take it one by one. I think step one is, I would say, never ask a customer, what do you want? What product can we build for you? That's not the question to ask. The question is, what are your problems that you're facing, and how do you solve those problems today? And the difference between those two questions, while it seems subtle, it's very big. Because let's take the same example. If you ask the same question to a very large company, which is, hey, what do we want to build? A very large company would tell you, oh, you want me build something super scalable, which does this, and has this features. Whereas a smaller company, a mid, like a Fortune 2000 company, will give you a totally different thing. But the problems are similar, right? So what you want to nail is, what is the problem? For us, the problem was, hey, I have too many alerts coming out of my security tools, and I don't have enough people to go look at those alerts. So what can I do? Right? That's the problem. They didn't tell us build an automation platform. They didn't tell us go build a very efficient ticketing system. None of that. So that's number one. Two, I think the other thing to do is, and this one, by the way, varies, and you should figure out how you want to approach. You can go after a vertical. You can say, hey, I'm going to actually go build a software company in healthcare vertical, which sells to healthcare. And there's been successful models done there. Or you can say, no, I'm going to build something that addresses everybody. I'm going to say something that addresses the top end of the market. My point is, having some sense of that customer segmentation early on is very important, because then you can go take that feedback with the right pinch of salt. It's like, when they said they want this, they are a Fortune 100 customer. Is that my target? And the data that comes from Fortune 100 and comes from Fortune 2000 will be very different. The third piece, which is the most important piece, is the beggars can't be choosers. As you're starting at that point, you're looking for all that feedback. So you need to pick out the most important problem statement that you're trying to solve, but you still need to start somewhere. So you need to do these interviews not in complete vacuum, and you need to iterate really fast. What I mean by that is you need to start saying, hey, what are your... So first interview could be, what problem are you facing? What is the biggest problem? Where do you spend the most time? All of those questions. You learn from that. You go to the interview number 2. Says, hey, based on our customer interviews, we believe that this is the number one. Are you facing this problem or are you facing something else? Third interview, by the time you might have made a hypothesis and you move on, says, you know what? We heard this. We are thinking of solving it this way. What do you think about it? What's wrong? So this iteration is super important. And again, a very factual data point. We moved from V1 to V29 of our slide in 45 days. 29 different versions in 45 days in that product journey till you nail it. And you have this conversation, you iterate. You nail it, you iterate. So that's I think to me, in the early stages, you need to figure out what's the core pain point.
So I think the iteration, 29 versions in 45 days, definitely a high bar to shoot for. So let's say you nailed on the first, once you cross that bridge, you figured out the product you want to build, you got a few early customers. What then? How do you think about scaling up from there? How did you think about hiring the first salesperson? When's the time to press the gas?
So I think actually even before that, there's another stage, Ankur, which is you got the idea clear. And this one, I think we made a mistake. So learning from that too, which is don't lose the touch with the customer between the time you talk to them on what to build and you have something to actually hand it to them. What I mean by that is there will be a good 9-month time between you think this is the idea I'm working on and before you're going to go, here is my beta product for you, Mr. Customer. We completely forgot about them. Like literally we forgot about the customer, the conversations, went back into our cocoon and started to develop things. Don't do that, because what happens is there could be intermediate milestones where you could refine things. Otherwise, when you come out with your beta at that point of time, you might be in for a surprise. And it was like, okay, we build this. And there was like, oh no, what I told you verbally is exactly not like this. Now, the good news is we were able to recover fast the changes, things. But my point is, it's very important in the journey to say, here is my mock-up. Here is my first set of metrics for the product that we are coming with. Here is my alpha code. Here is my beta code. So if you have the luxury of some customers who are engaged, keep that touch and go there. And I think that the point to your first sales guy, I actually am a firm believer, and it's very hard for CEOs to do, is sell to the first 5 customers yourself. I think if you're not able to sell to the first 5 customers to yourself, the sales guy you hire will not be able to sell at all. No matter how good the connection is, no matter how good they are as a salesperson. I might be off, but I think that's because nobody knows better about the product than the founder. If you cannot pitch your product, if you cannot position your product, nobody else can. Very true in the enterprise, at least, right? I mean, to me, you need to be in the face. Now, of course, you could use some advisors, you can use some salespeople to get the leads, set up the meeting if you don't have the initial set of meetings and customer meetings. But they're not selling. Like that salesperson is setting up the meeting. And we did that. We had an SDR internally who was setting up the meetings. They would sell mail with my name on my behalf with the co-founder as a signature. You send mails, set up meetings, but from the first meeting to the PO to understand the procurement process, to understand the sales challenges, Slavik, who's my co-founder, and me, we did the first 7 customers ourselves, first 700K ACV, 1.1 million TCV ourselves. There's no replacing that. Why it helped is when we were ready to hire the first salesperson, we hired our head of sales, we hired our first salesperson. We actually hired 2 sales, 1 SCs, and a head of sales. Nothing worked. Literally, we hired like 4 people 2 quarters, 120K. Here we had done 5 months, 1.1 million, 6 months, 120K. Like, what happened? It's like, what is not working? Is the product not working? Is the sales pitch not working? Is the salespeople not working? And if you had lived through the entire sales cycle, then you can pinpoint what is not working, because you know what's working and then you can compare it. Otherwise, you have no idea. You didn't sell.
And what was the thing? What's not working?
So what was not working was, I think, what we realized was when you as a founder are pitching, that pitch is very different than what the salesperson pitches, right? A salesperson is never going to go that deep, is never going to understand the core reasons. Like this whole history I told you is like I interviewed 35 people. Those interviews were in my head. When I would meet a CISO, I would know the pain point way better. And then the second thing that was not working was, by that time there were more competitors and the feature set. So there was both a product gap which we knew and how we were positioning gap. Product gap, we knew we were fixing it. But the positioning gap was huge. How do you differentiate yourself early, especially in a security market? It's super crowded. Everybody says the same thing. In other spaces too. So then we changed the pitch drastically, how we positioned, how we set the problem statement. And after that journey is like the Q3, Q4 of that year, we literally did 3x the first year, 3.5x the first year. So it was a very up and down ride, but once you nail the product, you need to nail the positioning, and you only founder can nail that positioning. You can hire a product marketer, but unless you have touched the customer, you're not going to nail that positioning.
Interesting. And given through the what Arka is focusing on, which is cross-border, both from a solid core as well as your Demisto, by the way, had teams in it was Israel, US, India. Tell us about how did you make cross-border teams work for you, and what was your experience there?
Yeah, so that's actually a very, very good question. I'm a big believer. I think India, Israel, all these places have amazing opportunity and talent. And pretty much all companies I've worked with some strong team there. There are some challenges. I think one is, if you start the company in India, and I'm seeing these challenges on a daily basis in Israel as well, and then you're going to sell to the US market, super hard unless you yourself spend a lot of time here. Goes back to the same. If you're not going to be with the customer, it's very hard. So one challenge of all the folks that if you guys are based in India versus having a team in India is like, how do you spend a lot of time here? And almost the other piece is get a co-founder level person in each region. Like as senior, should have a mind meld exactly like you, has the same skin in the game, which is all equity, not a salary level thing, because there is no second to that, right? And Solid Core was a good example where we found amazing senior people in India. And then we moved our entire product engineering from here. We started here. There was no engineering in India. We found some really two senior people. Entire engineering moved in year 2 and has worked beautifully. Like the product quality, the stability, everything. On the other hand, here we started everybody engineering in Israel, and Slavik and I here from a sales and marketing perspective. But then these two other co-founders in Israel, I was not worrying about the product quality. We were worried about product direction. I was guiding on the product management direction and what to build, what's other pieces from what we were hearing from the customer, feeding that back. But then you have a product management owner, my co-founder there. After you give that initial direction, all defined, built. So one is getting senior leadership on both sides. 2 is get ready to burn the midnight oil. I think there is no replacement for conversation. Slack helps, or whatever collaboration channel. We used it heavily. Even now, is you establish a culture of, when it's email world, you hesitate to ask a question because email is more formal. Slack is not that formal. Bring teams together often. So for the first 2 years, we did our sales kickoffs back in Israel. Nobody does sales kickoffs with the engineering team. where we did our sales kickoff back at the engineering team. Because the engineers need to feel part of the sales, and sales need to feel that the engineering is actually delivering what we want. So some of those are the key highlights.
Great. No, I think you had the good fortune of both learning from two different geographies.
Yes.
I think so you can combine both of those learnings. I think we're out of time. Radhesh, do we have a time for an audience question, or we're out of time?
We can take
Okay.
one or
Maybe
two
one quick audience question.
any raise of hands.
There's one hand there.
All right.
So my question is easy
One second.
first 5 customers, or is it easy to get the 6th to 20th customer?
You can use a mic. You can use the mic and ask a question. No, but
So-
I think the rest of the world.
So I was asking, I was asking him if it is easy to get the first 5 customers, or is it easy to get the 6th to 20th customers? Because
Neither.
why I was saying is, right, when you start with the product, you talk
Yes.
to people, and then you have the rapport with them, right? So maybe first 5 customers is easy.
Yeah. So I think the answer is I don't know if which one is easier. What I do know is the first 5 customer challenges are very different than the 6th to 20th, and they are very different than 21st to 100th. In some senses, as a founder, first 5s are easy because you have direct control. As I said, if you are selling those, you have direct control. You are running those. 6 to 20th, you need to kind of now take a backseat. And if you want to scale the company, you need to take a backseat in the sense that it's not that you're plugged out. I was still engaged. I still, like, even first 200 customers and even the larger deals, I'm now engaged, even at Palo Alto. But you need to figure out how will you scale. Is the same positioning messaging working? So I don't think it's easy. I think it's the challenges differ. The first 5, the difficulty is the product meeting their needs. 6 to 20th is how do you make sure you message the product, right? Because you're not going to change the product as often now from there on. So how do you make sure you position it right and you find repeatability?
So the moral of the story is nothing as an entrepreneur is easy.
Not at all.
All right, I think we're out of time.
One last question.
Okay.
So I think you touched on this point where you were like, between the time that a customer requests a feature or something about the product, you have to keep in touch with them because by the time you build it, you might lose touch. So like, how do you keep touch with them? Because often you don't have such substantial updates, or like you're still in the production process. Of what are ways you can keep in touch?
So that actually is a fantastic one, right? I think the touch, and this is where I believe is you need to be so the early customer cases, right? When they are early customers, you need to feel close enough with them to be able to give them small incremental updates or ask them questions. So what I mean by is be touch with them is when engineering asks a question of the PM, should I do this or should I do this? You should get to a term where you should be able to mail that customer or call that customer and ask them that question and build that relationship. Today, I talked to ADT, which is a security company, physical security company. They were our customer number 3 or 4. I am building a new product line now within Demisto as Palo Alto. And I says, so who do I go to ask this question? I literally picked up the phone and called this guy randomly. I haven't talked to him in 2 years, but guess what? If you establish that relationship, he remembers me, you call them. And we still had a flowing conversation in those 30, 35 minutes. So it's like, hey, I'm trying to do this. What do I do this? He would shoot something down. He would call something stupid, but build that relationship.
And one thing I would add is many times when you think what is not a substantial update, for them it's substantial.
Yeah.
First of all, they'll forget half the time what they, what you told them about your product because you're not top of mind for them.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a good point.
Don't
That's a good
overthink that.
point,
Yeah. All right. With that, please join me in thanking Rishi for a great conversation and some great learnings.
Good progress.
Thank you, Rishi. Appreciate it.